Welcome to the Magical Mommy Monday podcast. We really appreciate you listening. We'll be talking about everyday mom life with some pixie dust from Disney thrown in from time to time. This is a judgment-free zone. We know everyone parents differently, and we're just two moms doing our best as we figure out this whole parenting thing. So now, let's get this party started with today's episode. When you have those really productive days where you are just like, I killed it today. I did so many things. It's really nothing crazy. And yet for me, I was like, I did so much. But it was like, I cleaned the bathroom, which I've been wanting to do. Like really like gave it like a scrub down clean. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
and
I love it.
So good. I like did some laundry. I did the homeschooling with the kids. What else did I do? There was something else in there. Oh, and I did the workout this morning, but like, I don't know. And then I think there were like little things along the way that I was like, oh, I caught up on that. I caught up on this. And I was like, whoo, this day, probably tomorrow, I'm going to get nothing done. So
you were basically super mom today.
I mean, I don't want to brag, but a little bit, no. But it's bad when I have these days and it's so clear to me, and I'm like, oh, it's because this doesn't happen a lot. I don't do this.
You're like, if only I could do this every day, what my house would look like.
Right? I'm like, why was today different? What happened today that can't happen every day?
But I hear you on the bathroom. Like, so we have 4 bathrooms technically. They're not all full baths. We have 4 bathrooms. Yeah. So I have to set aside like a half day to do these bathrooms, and it has to be bathroom day. Mm-hmm. There are a few things that are as satisfying as deep cleaning the bathrooms, but it is such a pain. Like, okay, so I got one of those as seen on TV products where it's like the scrubber on the stick, but you push a button and it goes like,
yeah.
And it comes with the 3 different attachments. I watched that for probably 8 months at Target for it to go down in price. And when it finally did, I bought it. So that's what I clean my showers with when it's charged.
Is
Sometimes
it amazing?
I forget. Well, when you have the sliding shower door,
yeah,
and then it has the little crooks and crannies, and those get orange, and you can't get in there.
Yeah,
that gets in there.
I like it.
Do you like spray the mildew scrubber thing?
Yeah,
get in there with that. I know I sound like the ultimate housewife right now, but I don't know. It's something I can control in my life when my anxiety is running high, which is the topic of today's podcast episode is what I was telling Jen I could have majored in, which is generalized anxiety. Yes.
I'll be right there with you.
Just before we start off this episode, a couple things. First of all, our last podcast episode was with Jocelyn from Disney Gratitude on Twitter. We loved having her on the show. So if you have not listened to that, please do so at some point. Also, we would love any feedback that you have on our show. If you're enjoying it, if you're not, please leave us any feedback on our social media. We'll list those in the show notes. Yes. And while this show is a passion project for us, we do want to create something that you'll love as well. So that's why we ask for that constructive feedback. And then the final thing I have to say is I'm just giving you kind of a trigger warning. We're going to talk about our experience, our background with anxiety. Jen and I both do have it. So if it's something that you feel uncomfortable with or, whatever it may be, feel free to come back next week and listen to us then. We'll have something maybe a little more positive.
We'll go light next week. Yeah.
We are doing the deep dive. Whew, okay.
Yeah, let's
all out of the way. Radio Angela can go back in my pocket.
I love Radio Angela. It's my favorite.
It's the old Welcome to the Touring Planning Podcast.
Yes, exactly. It's what initially made me go when I was just listening and I didn't see you guys go, oh my God, this is so legit. This is such a legit podcast. I have to be on.
Then you met me and you're like, oh, this chick has no idea what she's doing.
Not true.
Okay, so Jen, wait, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
You start. You go for it.
It's gonna be a long story. I'll try to give you the cliff notes. Okay. So I was predisposed to have anxiety. Several family members have it in my immediate family. So it was just one of those things where I was gonna have it no matter what. There are certain things in my childhood that happened that kind of just bumped it up a notch. So I guess I'll get into that. So it's always weird. Like, it's like when you go see a new therapist, because, that's my life. It's like when you go see a new therapist and you're like, I guess I'll just break into my traumas now.
Do you want the list? Do you want to ask questions? How should we go about this?
Yeah. And yeah, I guess we'll just jump right in. So when I was probably 8 years old, my two childhood friends died in a car accident. They were both in the car with their family members, and both of them died. So all the kids in the family, they both died. So I learned very young what death was and that it could happen to children. Mm-hmm. And so I think I kind of started having a fear of death then. And I always was kind of more of a fearful child. I mean, It didn't help that when there was a tornado, my dad would be like, I'm going to go outside and look at it. I'd be like, no. that was my dad. He was just so curious with nature. Mm-hmm. But that kind of stuff always freaked me out. Yeah. Even though it's Minnesota, we're not really going to get horrible tornadoes. But I've always been kind of a fearful child. But when that happened, especially because they were my playmates and they were only a year or two younger and older than me, it really affected me. Yeah. And, just going to their funeral and seeing their bodies and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then the next year, I was in a car accident with my brother. A gas semi hit my side of the car. And I don't really feel comfortable getting too much into it, mainly because I don't want to cry.
And if you cry, I'll cry. I'm just letting you know that as well. Someone goes, I'm done. So,
okay.
So if we're going to cry, we can cry together. But if I'm just over here, like muting myself, sobbing,
I know. And then I'll cry because Jen's crying, and then it's going to be a
we'll just be like, forget it. We'll be back next week.
Feel like part one's over. So the year after that, I was in a car accident. A gas semi hit my side of the car. I was with my brother. We were okay. I miraculously broke only my wrist. And this is when kids who are 9 years old were totally fine to sit in the front seat of the car, which maybe they are now. I don't really know what the weight things are yet. But yeah, I just broke my wrist. But that kind of made things worse as far as the fear of death and stuff like that. And I didn't talk about it for a long time. I had really great parents, and, they put me in counseling and tried to get me to talk about it. But I just didn't want to for a really long time. And I had some PTSD from it, and I still do to this day. Like, if my husband's driving and I don't think that he's braking soon enough, I will just kind of freak out and be like, slow down. And he'll get so frustrated, but he understands where the root of it all is. Mm-hmm. So, so then things got kind of worse. So from there, I just had a cry break. So from there, that fear of death really got bad, and it kind of transitioned into a fear for my safety. And so I had a lot of trouble falling asleep at night because this is just getting really deep. This is like my deep, dark secrets that I have not told anyone. But I had a lot of trouble falling asleep at night because I was convinced if I fell asleep, I would die. Like, these are just a young kid who didn't really understand what had happened and what her fears meant. From then on, I had trouble sleeping because I was just, a little girl trying to figure out what these fears meant and processing kind of what had happened. So I was convinced that if I fell asleep, I was going to die, and sounds very dramatic, but I just had a lot of fear for my safety. And so, I had great parents, and they really did do their best. And it was to the point where, like, my mom had my grandpa come put locks on my windows because I was so afraid that someone was going to break in. It was just anything to make me feel safe. They were really wonderful about that. And I think I even slept on the floor of their bed for like a year on and off. But yeah, I mean, it took me a really long time to work through that feeling of being safe. I still really struggle with that. I would say that jujitsu has helped a lot because I have that knowledge that I can defend myself. But yeah, I have a fear of safety for my family, and I have a fear of safety, not so much for myself anymore, but just, in general. And I still have that fear of death, but I think I've talked with Jen and Frank about what helps with that, which we'll get to later. So that was, I guess, elementary school. And then high school is pretty good. My boyfriend, when I was a senior, was in a car accident and was in a coma for a month. So that kind of triggered some things, but that's not really my story to tell. But it was around that time, I would say, maybe right before I went off to college, that I started anxiety medication. And that was really helpful. I was on that for about 6 years, and, it helped me through college, which was a really tough transition. It helped me when I went to England for a semester, which was a really tough transition. But yeah, I continue to have anxiety because it's not something that just goes away. You have to work on it. And I did go to therapy on and off throughout this time. And what I want to say about therapy is that if you make the brave decision to go and you're not clicking with your therapist, it's like finding a good hairstylist. If you don't like the person who's doing your hair, if they don't do a good job, if you don't click with them, it's okay to find another one. Like I didn't click. Like I had someone in college who told me, I don't know why you're here. You're fine. You don't need to be here.
Sure.
And I don't want to say that the people who decide not to go to therapy aren't brave. I just think it's really hard to take that first step. Yep. So I just want to tell you that if you do decide to go, it's a brave thing. And if you're not ready, or if you think it's not for you, that's fine too. But that really helped. I don't know. And then I guess we'll get to kind of the signs and how it manifests itself in a little bit. And we'll talk about kind of how we're dealing with it during the coronavirus after Jen speaks.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing all of that.
Now it's all out in the open for the world to hear.
It's all out there, which is funny because before we were recording, I was telling Angela how I'm trying to write down some notes just to keep my memory fresh as I'm going to talk. And I'm thinking do I go down this lane? Is this too much? Should I talk? Whatever. And whatever comes out, comes out. So judging by how Angela just shared more than she thought, I'm sure I'll do the same. I will probably do the same as well. First of all, I did not have the experiences you had as a child, and I can't even imagine that. And yet I had such a fear of death to the point where The Living Years, do you know that song? Mike and the Mechanics song? I think it's Mike and the Mechanics.
I don't think so.
I'll have to fact check myself. It's a song. It is the worst song to me. As a kid, I would hear it come on and run and hide in my mom's lap and cover my ears. And it's kind of it's about death. And it why is this affecting? So I can relate to those fears and just the fear of, I definitely had anxiety, as a kid going to school, which was not recognized then. I recognize it in my own kid now. I wouldn't my mom probably didn't recognize it, where I would leave her notes on her pillow at night. I know you don't believe me. I really don't feel good. So I'm probably not going to be able to go to school tomorrow, and just try to get out of school any way I could. But so there was always something there. I definitely think it is a hereditary thing. But again, not really ever talked about or known or whatever until probably I got into it.
Well, I just want to say, having that fear of death is super common. Yeah. I realized, and I'll just say, since we're on the topic, what really helped me, which I told Jen and Frank, is watching Ask a Mortician on YouTube. She approaches death in a very interesting but natural way. And you'd think that it would make you fear it more, but it almost does the opposite. So I don't know where I was going with that other than that's what's helped me. Oh, and what I read by reading the comments is that so many people share this fear. And super common. So don't think like you're weird. And don't think that because I had these horrible near-death experiences that you're not allowed to feel that way, or any of you listening that you're not allowed to feel anxious or whatever. My experiences are nothing compared to what other people have dealt with.
But everything's relative, and everything is, and it's all different levels of how it can affect you. And I think, and I was always more afraid of death in the sense of like losing people close to me. Not even like my own. I think now I'm more afraid of my own. I think probably because of the kids that I'm like, oh my God, nothing can happen to me because of them. But I think in my life, it was generally more about everybody else around me than like myself. But so in high school, I think I just overall like had horrible self-esteem, like just pretty bad. And I think in senior year, like halfway through senior year, I started to feel like just not happy most of the time. And I think I was also chalking it up. This is, by the way, I'm coming up on my 20th anniversary of my graduation. God help me.
You don't look old enough. How is this possible?
God. I don't know.
Are you going to go to your thing out of curiosity?
I mean, probably not, but I probably know more about people I went to high school with now because of like Facebook than I did when I went to high school with them. So, but I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. Plus, who knows where the world will be by the time there would be some sort of reunion.
Might be canceled.
Might be a Zoom. So, I don't know.
Can you imagine? Okay, tangent. Sorry. That's my fault.
No, you're fine. So I did chalk it up to like all the changes coming. And as you know, as a Dillo, we don't like change. So I was like, oh my God, all my friends, we're all going to different schools. We're not going to be in our high school, by the way, was like 7th through 12th grade. So, and that was coming off of a grammar school from like pre-K to 6th grade. So everyone was pretty much together their entire lives. So like the idea of, oh my God, what is coming up? None of us have been like far away from each other. I was kind of chalking it all up to that. But I think it was getting worse and worse. And over the summer, like I still was feeling it. And then in August, I had a boyfriend who had started dating December of senior year. So, and his dad passed away in August. And that was like the straw, I think, for me, because he was the first person close to me that passed away. And it was sudden and it was unexpected. And it like threw me for a loop. And I didn't even know what to do with it. And it was the first week I went to. Everything was like the first, also at this time of change and everything like that. So, which again goes to like, I have such a fear of death, yet I'm not even attending funerals until I'm 18 years old, but that definitely weighed pretty heavy on me. And then I started school probably the end of August, beginning of September. And I went to a school 10 minutes from my house, but I lived on campus. Like you do. And you spend your parents' money to go 10 minutes away from home and live away. But I continue to feel this way. And I think after that, I like could not shake this like unhappy, depressed type of feeling. So I finally ended up telling my mom, I'm like, I think I need to see somebody. I am just sad all the time. And I don't know how to move past it. So we found a psychiatrist and we went. And like pretty much upon the first meeting, they prescribed me some meds. And that same day I went home and came down with the stomach flu, which like sent me back a week, like could not keep anything down, was just sick in bed for an entire week. Also like, I can't remember what month this is. This is like September, maybe October-ish, I don't know, of starting school as well. So now I'm out of school for a week and back home 10 minutes away and just sick as a dog. Also, because I can't keep anything down, I'm losing weight. So I lost about 10 pounds And
You're a tiny person.
Could never lose 10 pounds ever. So yeah. So, but when I started feeling better, I started taking the meds that I was prescribed. But with that, I was not gaining the weight back. And if you look at pretty much the first side effect of most of these medications, it's you may have a loss of appetite, which I didn't have because I was trying to gain this weight back. So I was eating pasta and ice cream, like all these other things to try to get the weight back on, which was not working, but it was kind of keeping me maintained. And because obviously it does something to your everything. But that kind of became the focus whenever I would go see the psychiatrist. They noticed how thin I was. They started questioning what I was eating. They got to a point of starting to weigh me every time I went in and like not really believing me when I would be like, here's everything I've been eating. And they're like, are you sure you're eating all of this? Like, oh, you see, I'm not losing weight, right? It's not happening. I think the first I won't say the names of the medications because if they work for some people, that's great. I'm not trying to bash any. But I think I wasn't on that too long because that it just made me kind of feel sick overall. So they switched me to another one, which turned me into an insomniac. And I also dropped out of school during this time. So I'm back home as an insomniac, staying up until like 4 or 5 in the morning. And having like not great thoughts, not suicidal, but it'd be cool to drive my car into a wall. I don't want to get hurt, but I just want to like just destructive thoughts, I guess, is the thoughts I was having as I was up until 4 in the morning. You look like you have a question.
Yeah, no.
I'll pause.
So during the time that you were out of school, what made you decide to leave?
Because I think I just felt so overwhelmed by not feeling great still with like medication. Also, tell someone with a low self-esteem already that like, we think you're anorexic. I think that's what's going on here. We're not going to use the term, but we're going to weigh you. Like it was all kind of messing with me even more where I think everything was so overwhelming. And the idea of let's start a new chapter of life just didn't seem ideal to me at that point. No. So I'm an insomniac for a while and still going back to the doctor. They're still doing all these things. It's not helping. I'm now feeling worse. I'm now staying up till all hours of the night, super skinny, which is just making me have even less confidence because I'm like way too skinny then. Like I already feel self-conscious being thin. I'm now too thin. So that wasn't great. And then they switched me to another medication. This is also over the span of 3 to 4 months, maybe. It wasn't even like that much time. So they switched me to another medication and then add one to it. So then I was on 2 medications at the same time. Wow. And that I still like over some time, I'm like, I'm still not feeling better. Like but they also weren't trying to figure out what was going on. Like what is causing the issue here? Because you guys are basically acting like it's an anorexic thing and that's not my thing. So what is my thing? And maybe we move away from that onto something else, but they didn't. And the last session I had with them was them saying, I think if we were to increase your dose again, we would probably want to do it in a hospital setting so that we could monitor your blood pressure. And, and I was like, hospital? Left the office, told my mom, I'm like, yeah, no. I'm not, that's again, not where I am. And you guys haven't even tried to figure out where I am. So luckily my dad knew someone whose wife was a psychologist. So we like called her the same day. She was like, what have they been giving you? And she kind of gave me a schedule to wean off the medication, which was a horrific experience.
It's not easy weaning off meds.
No. And then weaning off like 4 different kinds, basically in like 3 months. It was not an enjoyable experience. No. But I started seeing her and I went to her for probably a year and a half at that point. And went back to school the following September to a different school. So I lived at home, went to a different school, still graduated in 2004, just a semester later than I would have. But I basically tried to catch up because I was like, I will still graduate because I'm not a big school person. So I was like, I'm not like, let's go. Let me take summer classes. I don't care what I have to do. So that's the background of my stuff, I guess.
Wow. Gosh, what a lot to come back from. Having these thoughts, having a therapist that you just don't click with.
Yeah.
And having to make that decision to just walk away and find someone else when you're on all these medications.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a weird time too, because I think, now 20 years later, oh God, it makes me so sad that it's been 20 years. But 20 years later, I think things are different. There's still kind of a stigma attached, but I think people do understand mental health overall a little more, where it's more of a conversation than it was then. So even trying to explain it to my friends, and that same boyfriend who I had, we had dated for about 3.5 years overall, but he was very understanding and great about it all. But I do know that talking to some people, even some family members, there were definitely people who didn't get it. And there's a lot of people like that overall, which I think makes it hard for people to talk about or to seek out help if they wanted, or because some people will chalk it up to like, oh, you just, like me, I could say, oh, well, you just graduated high school. You just didn't want to deal with the change and, all of that kind of stuff. So I think it was a different time, and hopefully now more people do feel more comfortable talking about it for the most part, but I know it can still be difficult.
I think as far as medication's concerned, it can be daunting because sometimes like having a therapist that doesn't work out, the medication can't work out or might not work out for your body. And so then you have to wean off of it, go on another, see if that one works for 6 weeks. If it doesn't, you have to wean off of that, and that can be frustrating. But I had a friend in high school who went through a hard time, and she needed to go away, be put on meds, come back. And she was kind of sharing her experience with me. And her doctor said, think of it as needing glasses. If you need glasses because you can't see, you put them on. If you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, you take medicine to correct it, just like you correct your eyesight. So that's kind of how I felt when I took it. And like I said, I was on them for 6 years. And I found them very helpful. So, and I also found therapy very helpful. I went back to therapy last summer because I was really struggling with grief, and I was experiencing depression from grief, depression for the first time in my life, because 4 people died last year, and it was a lot, and I hadn't really dealt with it. So, it was just all new things. So I feel like I'd want.
And I'm definitely not opposed to medicate. I think if I felt that maybe that was something I need to explore again, I think I'm also being older, having been through some things that I'm more knowledgeable to know like, okay, let's go into this a little smarter this time, and really find the doctor I'm really comfortable with, and really learn more about what I'm taking and what's going to work best for me. Because I think it can do wonders, and I have seen it do wonders for people. And so I think it can be a great thing. I think maybe just my mix of doctors, medication, and the timing probably wasn't great for me back then, but I definitely wouldn't be opposed to that again if I needed to.
Well, and what is it? Hindsight is 20/20. All the information you gather over the years, you're like, gosh, if I had only known that there was another way, and I had no idea. Like I didn't know at the time that like, oh, if I don't like this therapist, I don't have to go to them. Things like that. Okay. So I guess that kind of brings us to our physical or emotional symptoms of anxiety or depression. Because there are physical signs, which I guess you just don't really think about until they're happening. And you're like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Sure. I think for people who don't necessarily realize they may be going through anything or even have anxiety, I think anxiety can manifest in so many ways. It could come out as anger. It could come out as fear. It can come out as short-tempered. You may just be extra emotional, whatever it is. I think back then, I definitely had a lot of panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and had to try to figure out working through those, which I think I did over time. And for the next 20 years, even if I felt something creeping up, I kind of subconsciously almost knew how to kind of bring myself back down and center myself and all of that. I think this new quarantine life of just worrying about your parents, worrying about family members, worrying about everybody basically at this point. There's just so much happening. You're watching your kids be ripped out of school. You're watching people not really think it's a real thing or understand it. You're going through so much as well. And I had 2 panic attacks within the same week, a few weeks ago. And I was like, whoo, haven't had this in 20 years. This is insane.
Welcome back, old friend.
Yeah, fantastic. I got no time for this. I got 2 kids. and I could feel it creeping up. And like at a point it was like, what's going on with me? Something's happening. And like all of a sudden it was like, oh, right. Oh, okay. Remember this. And like kind of tried to go into mom mode of like, I'm going to get my kids set up with a little snack and some TV. And I'm just going to like hide in the bathroom for a while, cry it out, take a shower, just try to come back as a person, which is what I ended up doing, but could still I still felt it, which I think is a few days later, why another one happened. I was like, oh, are these like back? Is this going to be a thing again? I'd rather not, but thanks for visiting. I'll see you again in 20 years. But no, to your point, because I think anxiety is just always something that's there. And it's about knowing yourself well enough and knowing when it's happening and knowing what you can do to try to bring yourself back from it and center. So I think for me, I think through the years, there's been some trying to focus on what I can control, replacing any kind of negatives with positives. I've done journaling. In this realm, I've been getting back into working out, although not a ton, but way more than I have in 5 years. So that's a healthy thing. And I think whatever you can do to recognizing it is key as well. I think some people try to fight it and like, I'm fine, nothing, and then it just builds and builds and builds. And because I think it's going to win. If it's there, it's going to win in some way if you keep trying to fight it and push it away. So the best thing is to kind of attack it head on and see what you can do to get yourself back to a better place. If it's reaching out to loved ones, if it's exercising, if it's going outside, which I'm trying to do as much as the weather will allow, I think that's key. I don't know if I told you about it or I talked about it on Theme Park Thursday for sure, but I saw on TikTok, where I get a lot of information these days, the lemon theory. Did I talk about that with you?
No.
That there was a therapist on TikTok talking about anxiety and that, one of the biggest things you can do is ground yourself. And he kind of does TikToks talking about different ways to ground yourself. And one of them, he said, is to keep lemons on hand, which I still don't have, but that if you feel anxiety coming, just bite into the lemon, because the texture of it and the juice and the acidity and all of that, like kind of does this whole rush to you to ground you. And I'm like, do I need to try this? This sounds amazing.
Your husband opens the fridge and there's a bunch of bite marks in the lemon.
Right? I'm just biting into oh, okay. You good? Do you need some time today? Or yeah.
He's like, it's been that kind of day. Okay.
Got it. Right. But yeah, I think it's just bringing yourself back to reality, because your brain can
spiral.
Spiral into just such a
Yeah.
crazy place of things that are not real or not happening. Even if it might happen, it's not happening now. So, and you
Mhm.
can't control it. So, and that's what the anxiety is. It's just trying to control something you can't. And so I think for me, I know my signs of, if my patience is a little lower. I also find, because I have hypothyroidism, that if my thyroid is a little out of whack sometimes, I kind of feel the anxiety creeping in a little bit. So yeah, it's great. So I know if maybe I'm a little more tired one day, or I just feel off, and maybe my patience is lower with the kids or whatever it is. There's something off about me, and I need to address it and figure it out and kind of get myself out of it the best I can. But if you feel like you can't ever, that's when it is important to seek help in any kind of way, whether it is calling a professional or just reaching out to a friend or a family member or whoever it is, to kind of try to not be alone in it, because that can be hard too. So
That's exactly like what I wanted to touch on. As soon as you were talking about that, I'm like, oh gosh, I really want to add to that. I don't know if you feel like this, but with my anxiety, which is a word I've used like 88 times at this point, I feel a lot of guilt because I feel like my struggles in my life will never be as bad as other people's. So how can I feel this way when I have it so good? I have a great life, great husband, great kids, good family. How am I allowed to still feel this way? So I feel a lot of guilt.
Yes.
And whenever I want to talk about it, or whenever I'm feeling this way, and it causes me to not want to reach out to people sometimes.
Yes.
A lot of the time. It's one of, I guess, the things that I'm worst at is, and I am getting better, but I don't talk to friends about how I'm really feeling a lot, because I don't want to burden them, because it's like, oh, they don't need to hear what I'm dealing with. It's not that big of a deal. I don't want to be a problem.
Yes.
I would rather talk to them about how they're doing, whatever, which makes me sound like such a martyr. Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to bother them. But no, it's a guilt thing. I don't want to be a burden.
Yes.
I don't want to, I have such a good life. How can I feel this way? And so so I withdraw sometimes. And like last week, Jen, you probably noticed, like I was feeling really anxious during this whole Corona thing, on and off. I would say like maybe every other week. I'm just like, can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
And I will like withdraw from social media, and I'm not as active there, or I'll be a little slower responding to people. And I look like a bad friend, and I look like a bad person on social media, but it's like, I just can't. I just can't handle it. And even the thought of like responding to people sometimes, it makes me even more anxious. And I have, again, gotten better as like when I'm feeling really panicky, or if I feel like I'm on the verge of a panic attack, I've gotten better at like texting friends or calling my mom. But yeah, a lot of times the guilt will stop me.
Yes.
As far as like the physical and emotional signs of, my anxiety and how it manifests, because I think it's important to talk about all the aspects in case people are experiencing this and they don't know what it is. You mentioned sometimes you're more emotional or get angry or snappy or impatient. That can definitely happen to me sometimes. Sometimes I'll feel like everybody hates me. I'm doing everything wrong. I'll look on social media. I'm like, this person's so much better than me. Why am I bothering with what I'm doing? I should just stop. I'm horrible. So that feeling that I'm not good enough pops up a lot. So that self-doubt. Or like I get really like, my feelings get hurt really easily. And then as far as physical symptoms, I get tingling in my face, or I get like, like when you're really cold and you kind of start shaking, I get that. Sometimes I can't take a complete breath. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have the coronavirus because I can't take a complete breath. And then I get like an upset stomach, so I'm not hungry. But yeah, I know that was kind of a mouthful, but I thought it was important to kind of talk about how I feel on the inside, because I know that I'm not alone in that. So
Yeah.
if you've been feeling that way, you are not alone either.
Yes. And I think especially now with the panic attacks creeping back up, the racing heart is huge. And, and the lack of breathing where like, and I almost felt like I wanted to scream, but I couldn't, it's almost like that. And sometimes that comes out in crying, but I will say I'm a lot better at preaching than practicing. Kind of like how you could have majored in anxiety. I'm like, oh, I know everything about anxiety. And then when it's me, I'm like, no, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk about it.
I'm trying to withdraw.
I am absolutely that way. And it kind of happened where, I let my husband know what happened that day. And as soon as he was done working, he kind of was like, I got the kids, go do what you need to do. But I didn't want to talk about it that day. And I was like, I need to process and I need to like feel it and I need to just go through it so that I can then have a conversation about it, and kind of just zoned out to some TV and took the night to just like try to sleep on and off or go to sleep early or whatever it is. So I'm definitely better at saying what is a great tip, but not always doing it. And the guilt, I feel all the same ways you do about the guilt across the board. And then add mom guilt to it of if I am not feeling myself, like the mom guilt is huge and through the roof. And my husband is always on me about this because he's like, you are with them all the time. You do everything with them. I'm like, yeah, but they don't like, I feel like I wasn't myself today and I wasn't doing as much with them. And they're probably, exactly. Like just everything. And he's like, okay, it's a day. Like, but all the guilt comes around and I don't want them to see me in any kind of way. And it's all of that where really you should be honest about it all, but I'm not ready for that yet with them I want them, especially during this time with everything going on, I don't want any kind of negativity for them. I want them to not look back on this as a time where like everything was pretty crazy. I would rather them be like, wow, we were going on a lot of walks and blowing bubbles. And like, I don't know.
We wore pajamas a lot.
Right. We wore pajamas all the time. It was a pretty good time of life, actually. So yeah, I can definitely, I just wanted to touch on that I can definitely relate to the withdrawing and the guilt on both sides for sure.
Yeah. You're better at pulling me out of that. Like you are great at being more consistent, especially on social media when I'm just like, peace. You continue to post to Dillows and this podcast, social media. And I'm so grateful for that because I am normally so much better at being consistent. But with this pandemic, like you were talking about panic attacks, I had one too. And, the heart palpitations and that feeling like you're going to die and like the hyperventilating, it's scary. You really do feel like you're going to die. So I know friends whose arms hurt and they're like, I'm having a heart attack.
Yes.
It's terrifying,
yes.
And I know someone who just in general, their form of anxiety comes in heart palpitations and they're like, I need to go see a cardiologist because there's something wrong.
Right.
But, we do have coping strategies that we've learned over the years. Yeah. Mine, first and foremost, is talking to someone, even if it's just saying, hey, I'm feeling really anxious today. And that helps because it just starts the conversation. Yeah. Taking deep breaths, when I'm getting that feeling like I can't catch my breath, that really helps. Kind of that self-talk. When I'm feeling really down and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you on this platform? You're horrible. Like, don't even bother. Being like, okay, this is just how you're feeling that day. Maybe it's that time of month. Maybe you're just having a bad day. Yep. These feelings aren't permanent. I've noticed during this quarantine, staying productive and proactive and controlling what I can within reason has been really helpful. And what I mean by within reason, like I've been exercising every day, but I'm not exercising for like 3 hours where it becomes a problem. You know what I mean? I'm trying to eat as healthy as I can. Did I eat 3/4 of a bag of chips today? I did. Of course I did. But Have I been eating more vegetables? Yes, I have.
Perfect. Balance.
Yeah, it's all about balance. It's all about that moderation with that bag of chips,
exactly.
Right? Did I also eat those Trolls Oreos? The Pop Rocks inside of them? So cool. Yes, I did.
I sure did.
I sure did. But yeah, those are things that have kind of helped me during quarantine is staying busy. I feel like, and getting outside. I'm sorry if you guys are in a place where you can't get outside. That is something that's really been helpful to me.
Yeah.
Even if it's just been in my backyard. That has made a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, there's snow on the ground, so it's much fun to be outside at the moment.
Well, it is April. Of course there is. So, I mean,
we've gotten snow in June before.
Yeah. Oh, my God. That's so crazy. Weren't you just talking about wearing sunscreen like a week ago?
2 days ago was, I think, 70 degrees or almost 70 degrees.
Oh, my God. So crazy.
2 days ago.
It's nuts. Yes, but being outside has helped a lot. And I think even for the kids too, I mean, just trying to take walks with them or have them ride bikes or playing with chalk outside, whatever it is. I'm trying to, on the nice days, I will, make school real short that day or incorporate it outside. I'm like, oh, write some sight words in chalk. Let's do this. And, whatever it is. But I try to take advantage of those days even more so now.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I do want to mention that, just because these are coping strategies that are working for us, I definitely have days or weeks, probably most of last year, actually, where I didn't get dressed and the house would be a mess. And I'm like, it's just staying that way. And I'm going to have a pity party for myself and just sit on the couch. Yep. And I still felt like a horrible mom, but there were really not great days where I wasn't productive and I didn't do my deep breathing and I didn't talk to someone.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have those days and that's okay. Maybe the next one will be better. Maybe you'll take a shower tomorrow and that will be the one good thing you did. Because I've had days like that too.
Yes.
Absolutely. Just do what you can.
And there's a lot of memes going around now of, it's okay to not be okay. And I think that's true anytime, any day of the week, any year, whatever it is, whatever is going on in the world with you personally. If nothing is really going on, that's everyone else can see. It doesn't matter. It's okay to not be okay whenever that happens. And like you said, sometimes it's just an off day. Sometimes it's an off 6 months, whatever it is. But yeah, and you need to find the coping mechanisms that work for you. And maybe you try some and they don't work, and that's okay because you will find what works for you.
I agree. I totally agree. And did you see that meme that was like, if you if you haven't started a new hobby, done this, done that, during quarantine, you have no excuse. And then it's crossed off and it's like, you're in the middle of a crisis and it's okay to feel how you want to feel. I'm like, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Stop telling us what to do.
I know. All these people with their projects. I'm like, what's happening? What? You guys have time for projects?
I know. I'm painting my main floor just because we can't get a painter for the next forever. So
right.
Someone's got to do it.
Yep.
We can't have 20 swatches on our walls forever.
Why not?
I mean, it's very avant-garde. I happen to like it. But, okay. So that is what we have for our show. Before we go, we did have an iTunes review from our previous guest, Sam from the Monday Morning Monorail podcast. She said, this is a great podcast. Have fun listening.
Love it. Thanks, Sam.
I don't know. This episode will be as much
this
fun.
Episode maybe not fun, but we will be back with a lighter episode. But in all seriousness, you can also reach out to us. Now you know two people that understand anxiety and are going through it. And if you are someone that communicates with us on social media or us in real life, whatever it is, you can contact us in a DL situation, whatever it is, whatever you need, because we get it. And there are more people like us out there than we think. So.
And you pretty much know our deepest, darkest secrets at this point. Exactly. So that's all we got.
Yeah.
And if you do want to reach out to us, you can do so on Twitter at Magic Mom Monday, Instagram at Magical Mommy Mondays, or we will put our own social media handles in the show notes for you to reach out to us if you prefer.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was helpful to some of you, and we'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.
Deuces. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magical Mommy Monday podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find us on Twitter at Magic Mom Monday and on Instagram at Magical Mommy Mondays. The music you heard on this podcast was written and produced by Matt Harvey. We'll see you next time.